There we go. There we go. I think we're recording now. My name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. For the record, I'm also a member of Al-Anon, and I've had problems in all sorts of other areas as well. Some of you, I know there are several people here that weren't at the earlier sessions in earlier months. And it looks like we've got a rehab. I'm not sure where the rehab is. You're very, very welcome. We're glad you're here. There we go. Hello. So what I'm going to say has to be pitched in such a way it's going to work for people who maybe have less experience of recovery, but will hopefully also be useful to people with more experience. So I'm an alcoholic. My date of sobriety is the 24th of July, 1993. To save you doing the maths, I was 21 when I had my last drink. In my 50s now. I was told that if I put AA first, I'd stay sober. I put AA first, I stayed sober. I conclude what they said was true. There we go, very, very straightforward. AA doesn't help me cope with living, it gives me a way of living. To cover the first 5 steps very briefly, before we get to 6 and 7. What makes me an alcoholic is that, yeah, I love drinking, fine. But sometimes people say they drank because they liked the effect. I drank even when I didn't like the effect. If I drank only when it was good for me, I wouldn't have a problem. I drank even when it wasn't good for me, when I was hating it. Okay, fair enough. That was rare. I generally loved it. But what was frightening was when I genuinely didn't want to be drunk, when it was important to me to be sober, let alone anyone else. I couldn't keep a lid on it. I couldn't stay away from the first drink. I couldn't stay away from the subsequent drinks. What that means, that's very, very bad news, by the way. If that's the case, if you keep returning to something which doesn't work, the reason this is very bad news is, and I get this from an acquaintance of mine who is a doctor. In fact, the chief physician of the largest mental health facility in Frankfurt, who said once you've got the addict's, the alcoholic's physical brain, you've got it forever. You're stuck with it. It's going to be like that forever. You can't change it. You can deactivate. It's like software on a computer. You can deactivate it in that it's not running, but you can't uninstall it. There is no uninstall option. It is always installed. And my problem is a bit of me wants to click on the little icon. It sees the little icon and it says, I'll click you. Don't care what's happened in the past. Sometimes I'm in another soft piece of software completely, and I think, I know, I'll navigate to the icon and then I'll click it. My problem is not that I've got terrible addict software loaded. My problem is me being in charge of me. Whilst I'm in charge of me, I'm going to click on the icon one day and then we're off. The virus will escape from the lab. So this is why there's a lot of bad news in the first few steps. I'm sorry about that, but that's just the nature of it. So step 1 is very bad news. Step 2 is even worse news. Step 2 is not go to some meetings and you'll be all right. Step 2 is not even do a few steps and you'll be all right. Step 2 is you will never be all right unless you're in the hands of a higher power. Yet, who knows what a higher power is? It's like it's offering you a solution which is completely impossible. It's completely inconceivable. What is a higher power? You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't explain it, but it is the only hope. It's almost like it's like going to the chemist's and getting a prescription filled, and you get your little pack of tablets home, and you look at the package leaflet and it's in Egyptian hieroglyphics. That's what the program is like. It says, here's the solution, but it's an impossible thing. There's higher power. So it's terrible. Now, you'd think that would be the worst of it. It gets even worse. Not only is the solution the higher power, but the solution is turning your life over to this impossible thing. What does that even mean? And that's what step 3 is, making the decision to turn my will over to something I don't believe in and don't understand. Now, it gets a bit easier here, as it says, don't worry. If you take the rest of the steps, you will understand steps 2 and 3 after the event. What you're asked to do in step 2 is trust other people who've said this will work. And then in step 3, you trust the process that other people have taken. So I'm not going to try and explain what a higher power is. What I'm going to say is I took the steps and I have an understanding of the higher power today. I'm very happy with it, very different than most other people's. This is why it's a disaster in meetings when everyone talks about their higher power, because everyone is talking about something different. It's very rare for me to be able to use someone else's concept of a higher power. I had to develop my own. But I didn't even need to do that as an activity. It just happened. I just did the rest of the steps and continued to do them over the years, and I got an understanding. But the good news is, once you've got over the horror of the first 3 steps, that life is impossible as an active alcoholic, it's also impossible sober. I can't cope, I don't want to cope, I don't want to be here, all I want to be is drunk. I'm being asked to believe in something which is impossible and then do an impossible thing with that power. But the actions I then take are doable. Step 4, make a list, get a good sponsor. A good sponsor is someone who is clear and straightforward. They're not there for cuddly wuddly or snuggly wuggly. They're there to give you things to do, and when you've done them, to tell you you've done them wrong. Not in order to beat you up, but so that you can learn how to do it right. If you were learning how to paint or play the piano or do anything, and you went to your first lesson, they showed you some things, and then you went away and practiced for a week and you came back, you would expect everything you're doing to be wrong. And I'm afraid, it's just like, or learning a language. If any of you have learned a language, most people have had a hack in England anyway, have had a hack at French at school. And everything you say is wrong. Everything you write is wrong. Every word is mispronounced. It's what recovery is like. Everything you do will be wrong. It's fine. Be quick and make your first 10,000, your first 100,000 mistakes with the program. The sponsor is there to give you things to do and to redirect when you mess them up. So you're not supposed to not mess them up. You're supposed to mess them up. The only way to learn how to do something is to do it very, very badly. And then you do it just badly. And then you do it averagely. And then you do it passably. And then eventually you start to do it well, and then you do it very well. But you can't skip straight to doing it very, very well. You've got to do an awful, horrible job where everything is wrong. And then there is something to work on. That's the starting point. So it's fine. So a good sponsor is someone who will help you. First of all, do it and then secondly, do it better. Step 4, I won't go into the details of step 4, except to say it is a catalogue. It's a list, really, with a little bit of detail, which sets out where I've been, what I've done, and why. All I need for it is memory and an ability to tell the truth. Now, that itself is a bit tricky, because I've got to learn to say things as they are rather than spinning a yarn or building a case. I'll give you a good example. Many years ago, I was at an AA conference somewhere in a mountain. Well, not in a mountain, on a mountain. And I approached this so-called old timer. Never trust an old timer. I approached this old timer and asked a question. I got a very strange response, and I started to question my whole recovery. This man did not know me, but he'd responded as though he knew me very well. And I went to my sponsor and recounted the whole story. And he said, "Oh, don't worry, he does that to everyone. Don't pay any attention. It's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it." Now, there is a point in the past I would have said, when I spoke to, he wasn't called Bobby, but let's say he was called Bobby. When I spoke to Bobby, Bobby made me feel insecure. Now, step 4 is about telling the truth. The truth, no one made me feel anything in that situation. Bobby said something. I interpreted it to mean I had a bad recovery. I concluded I had a bad recovery and I felt insecure because I concluded I had a bad recovery. That's telling the truth. Same story, different words, going from he made me feel insecure to I concluded my recovery was bad. Very different ways of telling the same story. So step 4, yes, it's about telling the truth, but it's stripping away all of the entanglements with other people to say what is actually going on. That takes some skill and some time to learn how to do. And if you've got a good sponsor, it will help. But if you do it badly, it will. This is the funny thing. My first step 4 was horrible. I'll tell you another little story. I met someone the other day that said, and they'd come to AA a few years before me in the late 80s. And they said they couldn't find anyone they couldn't be sponsored because they couldn't find anyone who would do the program properly, the big book way. And of course, no one did it the big book way in the late 80s and early 90s. You just did as you were told. And if you wanted to learn about the steps, they'd say go to a step meeting and you discuss the 12 step, the book, Bill W.'s book, The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, which is very good, but it's not the big book, it's a different book. And so I did the steps in accordance with how it was done in AA at the time, which was not particularly big book. There was a little bit of big book in it. There were 3 columns, not 4. And I'm not going to go into what the step 4 method was, but it was much slimmer than what we do today. But I did it to the best of my ability. And guess what? I stopped drinking and my life got better. I did it with the wrong method, according to lots of people, but I did it sincerely and I did it as honestly as I could. Now, I've got 29 years of extra layers of honesty, which have peeled back lots of the BS that would have been in that first version. But there's time for that. You've got the rest of your life. The job is to do it as well as you can, given the instructions you've got, the sponsor you've got, and your ability to be honest with yourself at the time. You don't have to do it as well as Susan or Bobby or Peter or anyone else. I only have to do the program as well as I can do it, which is very important. I was mentally ill when I got sober. So I wouldn't have been capable of the levels of self-awareness that hopefully I've achieved today. My mind just wasn't working well enough. But if you're sincere and you do it as well as you can, you're open to the direction from the sponsor you picked, you'll be okay. Some people aren't good with a technical sponsor. So if you've been drawn to someone who's not technical and you don't get a very technical view of the stuff, fine. You've probably got the sponsor you're supposed to have right now. There isn't a right way. There is the way that's presented to you, and do it that way and then see where you are at the end. So step 4 needn't be daunting or worrying. The reason I say all that is because although I do the steps in accordance with the big book, that mustn't itself become a religion or a straitjacket. Lots of people do the steps in all sorts of ways and get well anyway, even though they've done it differently than me. There isn't a single way. There is the way I do it and the results I get. There we go. Step 5. A good step 5 is half an hour to 45 minutes of all of the secrets, the nasty little secrets. You don't need to do the full sort of box set for each one. Just the trailer will do. The trailers are completely pointless. They tell you everything that happens in the film, completely spoils everything. I refuse to watch trailers. Whatever suspense or excitement the film would have built up is destroyed by the trailer. So in your step 5, when you're telling the stories, do them like trailers. Reveal all of the big important things. Like if there's going to be a tidal wave in the film, you'll see it in the trailer. And then that spoils the whole thing. Spoil the story in your step 5. Give the big thing that happened. And then boom. A friend of mine says that a friend of his has this art of telling a complicated story very simply. Someone once asked her, what was your childhood like? And she said, I was fat and we moved a lot. That tells a big story. I understand that. You don't need many words to express a lot. Sometimes the more words you use, it becomes like pass the parcel, where each person, when I think the music stops with you and you have to unwrap a layer and then the music starts and you pass it on, and then whoever the parcel stops with, you unwrap a layer. And inside, there's almost nothing. It's all wrapping. We're after what's in the middle of each thing, each story. So what I want to do at the end of step 5 is to have gotten all the secrets out and to have gotten my main character defects on the table. Step 4 does need to be detailed, but the purpose of the detailed work is to produce the set of headlines for the step 5. What is, I find, a very good practice is between sponsor and sponsee to go through the step 4 in detail as you're doing it. So the sponsee is not doing step 4 in the dark on their own, building up a huge catalogue of nasty little things they've written down, but to be offloading those things as they go, talking them through as they go. So the sponsor is helping them tell each little story accurately and clearly and seeing the truth. And then step 5 is pulling together the threads to build a general picture. And then the great thing about step 5 in 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, you can walk round your whole story. You can tell your whole life story in 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Very important. Step 6 and 7. Do I have it? Let me just get a big book. So in the big book, it's got a couple of pages. Now, there's one of the difficulties with the steps. We've got 12 steps, and there are 12 months of the year, and the months of the year are pretty much the same length. I know February is 28 days and other months are 31 days, but a month is basically a month. With the steps in the book, the 12 and 12, the step 1 is a very short chapter. The step 12 is a very long chapter. Step 4 is quite a long chapter. Lots of the other chapters are quite short. But a chapter is a chapter. There's a big old chapter for each one. Sometimes like this, we have a sequence where there's 1 hour on each step. Also, today it's 2 steps, 6 and 7. But the danger is thinking there is as much to say about this step as there is about step 4 or step 7 or step 9. That because there are 12 steps, the program is divided up like a cake divided into 12 pieces. Each piece is the same size. They're not the same size. They're all important, but some steps are considerably more complex than others. Now, this sounds like a pointless and obvious thing to say, and the reason it's not, the danger with step 6 and 7 is trying to make more of them than they are. And I'm in a WhatsApp group at the moment. I won't say what one it is, because they're very nice. I'm very pleased I'm in it. But every day there's a reading from a recovery book. And the recovery book is a book on the 12 steps. And they've divided, let's say we're in June at the moment, so they're on step 6, and the book spins out step 6 over 30 readings, trying to make 30 important big points. And frankly, I think there are a couple of points to make about step 6. There are a couple of points to make about step 7. Trying to make more of it than it is just as much a problem as skimping. So if you're cooking, if you miss out ingredients, you're going to end up with a different cake. Let's say it's a cake recipe. If you miss out ingredients, you're going to end up with a different cake. You're not following the instructions. If you add things which aren't there, you're doing the same. You're not doing it better because you're adding more to it. And people write whole books on step 6 and 7. There's a book called Drop the Rock, which people speak very highly of. I'm sure it's very good, but it's making a lot out of a simple idea. Is it necessary? Do we need to make all that much out of it? So I'm wary of making more out of things than is in there. Step 11 is a good example as well, when it says praying only for knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry that out. That means not only must I do that, I'm failing in the step if I don't pray for knowledge of God's will for me and the power to carry that out. If I'm praying for more than that, I'm breaching the step as well. So you can spoil something by too much as well as too little. And 6 and 7 are the same. Let's now 6 and 7 on the wall scroll. Many meetings there'll be the 12 steps listed on a scroll which is on the wall, so you can remind yourself of what the step is. But that's like the title of the step. The actual step itself, as with all of the other steps, is the section of the big book which tells you what you're actually doing. Just like in a recipe book, there's a page at the front where it says these are the 12 recipes, and it might be recipe 4, Black Forest Gâteau, recipe 5, quiche Lorraine. Now, from the words Black Forest Gâteau, you would not be able to make a Black Forest Gâteau. From the words quiche Lorraine, you would not be able to make a quiche Lorraine. You need a recipe. So the real step is not the title, it's the passage of the big book which covers it. So step 1, to really do step 1, you're looking at a good 40 odd pages to cover to understand step 1. Step 12, you've got chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11. You've got several chapters on step 12 in its various forms. Step 6, you see you've come to a good one because we've just got 2 paragraphs. Let's look at step 6. Before we get to step 6, we do step 5, and then it asks us to review. Have we missed anything? Have we done the first 5 steps properly? And then we've got the first line. This is page 76 if you're following along in your books or watching the laser display screen. It says, have we tried to make mortar without sand? In other words, have we done a good job so far? And it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, then we look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness. I'll read the whole thing, then go back. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take all of them, everyone? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And then step 7. When ready, we say something like this. My Creator, am I now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad? I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. 2 paragraphs. So what is it talking about here? It's talking about the removal of a defect of character. In fact, all of them. But it's more than that. It says previously, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good or bad. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll say to yourself, well, that sounds a little bit familiar. That sounds a little bit like step 3. God, I offer myself to thee. Step 3, I offer myself to thee. Step 7, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. They're the same thing. It's slightly wordier in step 7, but it's essentially the same thing. Step 7 is step 3, but with a greater understanding of what we're turning over to God. It's as though in step 3, I'm doing it in principle. Now we've got the facts on the table. But it's the same thing. And there's an idea here. God is going to have all of me, good or bad. This means I do not need to analyze or examine each individual defect of character in step 6 or 7. We've done that in 4. We've summarized it in 5. All of the defects, here's the great thing. Imagine someone says to you, go into your fridge and take a big black bin bag and take all the expired food, all the food which is past its sell-by date, and put it in the black bin bag. That's step 4. It's now in the black bin bag. Step 5, get each of the items out and tell someone. So here we have a quiche Lorraine, which is dated the 27th of February, 2019. Here we have some coriander ground from Sainsbury's, which is dated 1997. Still good though, but it's dated So step 5, you list all the things you found in the fridge. You get to step 7, it says, okay, so we put all the bad things back in the black bin bag. So you now have a black bin bag with all of your character defects in it. And then it says, and you think it's going to say, you think you're going to take out the black bin bag. And it says, no, go back to the fridge, take all the food which you think is good, put that in the black bin bag as well. Because it says, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. Everything's going in the black bin bag. Everything. Your fridge will be empty. So even the cake that you made and spent all that time making yesterday is going in the black bin bag. The fruit you stewed for the week for your breakfast every morning this week, that's going in there as well. The cauliflower cheese you were looking forward to for Tuesday evening is going in the black, everything is going in the black bin bag. So it doesn't matter whatever you've done so far, the purpose of looking at it in 4 and 5 is to get rid of the secrets and to get some willingness. But everything is going, which is why it doesn't need close examination. It just needs the willingness. So what does it mean to get rid of everything? I'll tell you. It talks in Bill's story. So if you want to really understand the steps very quickly, Bill's story is very good. So from page 19, sorry, from page 9 to page 16 is a very good presentation of the whole of the AA program. He talks about this chap who visits him's roots grasping new soil. It talks in, I think, The Family Afterward or To Wives, one of those two, about if the relationship is going to work, it must be on a new basis, for the old one didn't work. Bill talks about the character defects being removed root and branch. So we're not clipping off leaves off the tree and putting those up to God, saying remove those and give me nicer leaves. But I want to keep the tree, just give me nicer leaves. God is saying the tree has to go because I can't plant anything whilst your tree is there. The problem is not that the tree is producing bad fruit. The problem is that there is a tree in the first place. What does this mean now? What does this mean practically? That's the theory. Practically, most of you look as though you probably live in Western civilization. I don't recommend it, but if you're stuck there, you're stuck. I mean, I've never been entirely sure that I'm on the right planet, frankly. People are worried. People aren't they? They're worried about aliens. They're worried about, particularly in America. I don't know if there are any Americans here, but lots of Americans think they've been abducted by aliens. Maybe they have been. Who knows? Tradition 10, we have no opinion on outside issues. My secret belief is they're not abducting people, they're dropping people off at my home group. I don't feel as I belong particularly on this planet or in Western civilization, but here I am. But the rules of Western civilization, as far as I can see, are you should be ambitious. You should want a career. You should want to be good at things and have people say, "Oh, aren't you good at that? Well done." And you should want money because, well, you can buy things. I saw a clip from a film, and it was the clip the scene in the film. It was around the early 20th century where new electrical gadgets were being made and manufactured and marketed for the first time. And I think it was a washing machine. A man was trying to demonstrate a washing machine, and he was saying, well, it's marvelous because it will save you a lot of time with your laundry. And the people around are a little bit interested, but they start asking questions. They say things like, yes, but why do I want to do the laundry quicker? And they say, well, you'll have more time. They say, well, okay, that sounds good. But are you going to give us the washing machine? And the man said, no, you'll have to buy it from us. And then they say, well, does it run by its, how does it run? They say it runs on electricity. So are you going to give us the electricity? And they said, no, you'll have to buy it. Who from? From us. So you'll have to buy the washing machine from us, and then you'll have to buy the electricity from us. And they say, well, to get that money, I'll have to work. So all the free time that I'm going to have, because I now have a washing machine rather than doing my laundry, I'm going to have to work to earn the money to pay for the electricity and for the washing machine. So I won't have any more free time than I did before, except now I'm working and giving you the money. Looks like what you're offering to me is the opportunity to work for you. And I've observed, this is just an observation. I think I'm correct in observing that mankind has been producing labor. I'm going somewhere with this, by the way. I'll tie this back into step 6 and 7 in case you're worried about where this is going. It's my observation that a big selling point of lots of things is how much more convenient they are. Labor saving, and thousands of years of we don't have to grow my own wheat. I can go and buy a loaf of bread. If the system worked, I should have lots and lots of free time. If labor saving devices saved labor, I wouldn't have to work so hard. I don't know about you. Most people I know are tired and work very hard and are stressed. So it doesn't work, does it? The system doesn't work. Doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what my life is like without a program. I have to work very hard to keep all of the plates spinning in the air, and all I am is exhausted and fractious and resentful and frightened and disappointed, living life based on self. And I was brought up with particular values. You must do well at school. You must get a job. When you get a job, you must get a qualification. Why? Because then you can get a promotion. Why? Because then you can have more money. Then you can live in a bigger house. Why? You'll be happy if you can live in a bigger house. That was the bill of goods that was sold to me. Now, if you're doing that and you're thrilled in your very senior position and super relaxed, amazing. I'm so pleased for you. How many really successful people have you met who are like super relaxed, like chill, totally chilled? I really had to ask myself these questions. This is the question in step 6. It's not about, I've got the character defect of this. It's not about individual character defects. It's about a basis for living. Now, you'll probably have noticed that I am talking to you as a physical person, and you are here as physical people. I am in a flat, which I've had to pay for, and I have a job that I earn money to pay for the flat. But you see, this is ultimately terribly simple. I was at a meeting many years ago with my friend James, and we were getting frustrated because everyone was talking about spirituality. It's not people couldn't even necessarily pronounce it. Half the room was calling it spirituality, which I think is marvelous. I think we should all call it spirituality. Anyway, and he nudged me and said, "What do people mean when they say spiritual? I don't know what they mean." And I don't think they would have if you'd stopped them mid-show and said, "Oi, Bobby, what do you mean? When you say spiritual, what do you mean?" I doubt you'd have got an answer. But I looked it up. I can't remember where I looked it up, but I looked it up somewhere very simple. And it said, spiritual contrasts with the material. And I can work with that. The material world is the world of things and roles in the world and circumstances and stuff and money and politics and economics and borders and the natural world. That's the material. The spiritual is everything lies beyond that. The sunset is material. Your appreciation of the sunset is spiritual. If you love someone, that's spiritual. If you hate someone, that's spiritual. It's all of the internal stuff. So material, spiritual. What I'm being asked to do in 6 and 7 is move from a material way of living to a spiritual way of living, which means my primary purpose is exactly what it says in tradition 5, to carry this message to the still suffering alcoholic and Al-Anon and whoever else. How do I do that? Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, moving from the basis of the material to the spiritual, I get to do a couple of things. I get to carry this message through service, through sponsorship, through meetings, through the many other ways in which we carry this message. I get to carry the message. I get to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now, in step 3, I made the decision to turn my will and life over to God, which means that this is a relief. It means my life belongs to the higher power now. It is not my life. But I get given back affairs to practice the principles in. So I get given back relationships, situations, groups, this session, at my place of work. I get given things to do. People call me up and say, will you do this? And I say, yes. I don't have a career. I have things to do. The word affairs, if you look up affairs in the dictionary, there are different dictionaries. They'll give you different definitions. But basically, affairs are activities, things to do. So I don't have even areas of my life. I get given things to do by the higher power. If I feel stressed, it means I've taken ownership of those areas of life and called them my life. To be frightened is to think that something will be taken from me or that I will fail to get something. So to be frightened is to be possessive. I've never been frightened that anyone else is going to be evicted from their flat. When someone says, when friends say, oh, I might lose my job or I've lost my job, I'm very sad. But my soul does not lurch. I'm all right with that. I think the French philosopher Montesquieu, or what was he a philosopher? Writer, said, people find it remarkably easy to bear other people's troubles, if only they could learn to bear their own troubles as lightly as they bear other people's, which is brilliant. This is the point. The problem is not the trouble. The problem is the possession. If I'm resentful, if I'm upset, if I'm frightened, I'm holding on to something. You know what? Isn't it just easier to let go? Wouldn't it just be nicer to float through? Basically, I'm going to use a bad word, not giving a shit. Now, I must be careful to act in other people's interests. So I give a shit in that sense. I do the tasks that are in front of me to the best of my ability, diligently, even if no one is watching. But I can't afford emotionally and psychologically to give a fundamental shit about any of these things, because as soon as I do, I've made them my own and I'm under threat. Fear is a sign I've taken possession. I'm occupying territories that do not belong to me. So fear is not insecurity. Fear is colonization. I've colonized an area that doesn't belong to me. I need to retreat back to me, which is spirit. So 6 and 7, I'm being asked to move from a basis where it's my job and my house and my reputation and my car to nothing belongs to me. But I've got God, give me a few things to do today. And by the way, look after me. And if I need to do something to look after myself, show me what that thing is. And saying, I'm all right because God's going to look after me. And that's a position I get to choose to adopt. I choose to adopt the position God's going to look after me. I don't try and convince myself that's true. I take it to be true. God's going to look after me. There we have it. End of discussion. End of insecurity. I'm of infinite worth because I exist, as are you. End of discussion. No need to discuss that again. The matter is now closed. 6 and 7. So who does the removal? Now, God brings about the change in my life, but there's a wonderful principle. God will do for me what I cannot do for myself. God will not do for me what I can do for myself. So I do what I can, and God does the rest. This is also, if people are interested in the 12 traditions and the 12 concepts, concept 6 and step 6 are very closely aligned. In concept 6, it talks about the board of trustees taking chief initiative and active responsibility for running AA's affairs. And in the removal of defects, yes, God does the removal, but I must take chief initiative and active responsibility. The best possible example is being late for things because you get up late. God will not put me to bed like a little child at 10 o'clock. God will not prevent me from staying up till 2 in the morning. I have to do that. I have to get ready for bed and close my little eyes. God is not going to close my eyes for me. Very hard to go to sleep when you're pacing around the room or doom scrolling about you know what. God will not stop me from going on Facebook. I have to stop me from doing that. God will give me the strength to do that, but I'm the one that has to shut the app down. I'm the one that has to set the alarm. God has never set an alarm clock for me. I'm the one that has to haul my heavy legs out of bed at 6:15 in the morning. God has never come into my room and lifted me out of bed like the babes in the wood. It does not happen. And unfortunately, this is true with everything else. So unfortunately, with the removal of defects, it looks to the untrained eye like I'm doing everything. But what does that really mean? What it means is I get to take, what do I have to do for the removal of my defects? The program, it anticipates this by saying, step 8, da, la, la, step 9, da, la, 10, 11, 12. If I do the last 5 steps, the defects get removed. Are they removed perfectly? Yes, absolutely. I'll give you an example. If I go to work and for 1 hour, I'm concentrating on the task in front of me. I'm not going to say what I do for a living. For years, my other half referred to it as typing because I literally type at a computer. He's now switched and has decided to call it spelling. So I do my spelling for an hour. When I'm concentrating on that, I'm not jealous of anyone. I'm not frightened. I'm not resentful. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm not arguing with anyone. In fact, I'm not doing any bad thing at all. In doing the right thing, I'm not doing any of the wrong things. I'm not at the dog track gambling. I'm not at a massage parlor. I'm not committing genocide anywhere. Whatever the sin is, when I'm doing the right thing, I'm not doing the sin. So all of the defects are removed perfectly in that moment. They can come back. That's different, but they can be perfectly removed. If I have a moment when I'm not acting out and I'm in a good temper, then my defects have been perfectly removed. So my job is to make the amends diligently and carefully under the guidance of a good sponsor, and then to spend my life in step 12, wake up to the higher reality and keep reminding myself of that higher reality by a morning meditation with other people. Big Book, page 87 suggests morning meditation with other people. So I do that. And then living my life divided between two things: carrying the message, practicing these principles in all my affairs. So I don't go to work. I go to a particular location and practice the principles of diligence and patience and tolerance and all of the other things that I'm asked to do, and good temper. So I don't work, I practice principles. Big difference. So I do those things. When I'm doing those things, the defects are removed. I'll give you an internal example, because people are often troubled by 30 years ago, we would have said, I'm mad, I'm batshit crazy, I've got washing machine head. Now we use terminology instead. That's progress, apparently, to use terminology. And a few years ago, people started saying, I'm having intrusive thoughts, as though a new thing has been invented. All thoughts intrude. It's not like you say, well, you're sitting there saying, I know, I shall go and have a thought. So you go to the thought cupboard and pull the thought out. All thoughts intrude. That is what they are. You don't go and get them. They think themselves at you anyway. So one of the problems, a thing that people often say is this wonderful phrase that they phone you up, and I've done it. I've phoned people up and said this: I'm full of fear, like I'm a pot, like a chamber pot, and I've been filled with fear by something else. And now I, the chamber pot, am reporting that the little pot is full and needs emptying. The truth is this: imagine this. Fear knocks on the door, and I rush to the door, and I open it. So I do come in, do come and sit down. Let's have a chat. And then fear says, I know, I'll bring all my friends over. Let's just leave the front door wide open, and then any idiot passing can walk straight in. How about we just let everyone in? And how about we give them sugar and caffeine? Let's do that. And then I phone someone, and they can barely hear me because of the party that's happening. I'm full of fear. I'm the one that opened the door in the first place. No one. Okay, my mind, there are two elements. Thoughts come at me, and that, in a sense, is part of my mind. But I am the one that chooses whether to let those thoughts in. It's impossible to be frightened, to feel fear, unless I believe the content of the fear thought. So, example, you read some, every 4.5 minutes, some news headline somewhere in the world uses the word nuclear. If you look hard enough, you'll find the headline every 4.5 minutes. A new one comes up. If I feel fear when I read that, it is because I have believed the fear proposition. Fear proposes itself to me, but then I'm the one that decides that fear is real and true. I am the one that decides how I feel by what ideas I let into my mind. The thought might occur to me, that's so unfair. One of my clients dropped a contract with one of their clients, and a line of work that had done for 20 years dried up. And the thought proposed itself, this is so unfair. And for a while, I thought to myself, well, this is very unfair. I've been very badly treated. I was the one that believed the thought, this is unfair. I turned it round and said, I have no opinion. Tradition 10, I have no opinion on this. And as soon as I decided I had no opinion, it stopped being unfair. So this is a good example. I can't control what thoughts knock on the door. I can control, with practice, which ones I let in. Where does God come into this? God helps me discern which thoughts I should let in and which thoughts I shouldn't. God gives me something else to do So he gives me some knitting or some cleaning to do rather than answering the door. So I can be getting on with something useful whilst the persistent knocking is taking place until it stops. And God eventually removes the intrusive thought or the potentially intrusive thought from the doorstep. And at some point, the knocking stops. I can't make the knocking stop. God can make the knocking stop. My job is to get on with something useful, to redirect my attention to something else whilst the knocking is going on. So with the removal of any particular defect, God always gives me something to do instead. And in the long run, the temptation to act out on that defect is removed, but God does that bit. Jason, I'm winding up on 6 and 7, so should we go to questions and answers?
Yeah, did you want to field those with like hand raise function, or are you right to do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Also,
So
just one more thing, if that's all right, Tim. Could the questions be a bit more wider than just step 6 and 7, or you just want to focus on 6 and 7?
I think the main thing is that the questions, have a little think before you ask the question to make it brief, because sometimes there's a 5-minute share in the place for a question. What we're after is questions. So have a little think of what the question is. We've got a few more sessions if people are very confused. So
Okay, over
so
to you.
the questions, great. So the questions can either go in the chat or people can raise their virtual hands. I've got about 10 minutes before I have to scoot.
Everyone's quiet. Don't be shy.
All right.
Elaine.
Elaine, hi. Sexaholic, and yeah, and I have I'm very touched if someone is criticizing me, yeah. Then it's in myself, and I get a harsh tone. Then all the friends of my fear come in, you know. And yeah. And of course, I discovered. I asked God, why this tone, you know? And then I had no idea where I am in this situation. I am right, you know. But then I saw another person and he was my mirror, and I said, "Wow, what a tone!" And that makes, you know, it's going up. You know, one person hurt another person, and yeah. And what can I? Yeah.
Okay, so learning to detach from what other people say and do and think and feel, particularly about us, that takes some practice in my experience. But it starts with this. Any event that happens in my life, so someone else saying an unpleasant thing is an event. I operate with this principle. It has only the meaning I give it. If a mad person sat on the bus next to you and started criticizing you, and they were clearly mad, you'd laugh. Well, why not? Why is one not laughing when other people do it? So if someone criticizes me and I feel hurt, it is because I have given it significance. I did it to me. They gave me the opportunity and I took up the opportunity. So it's learning which bit I'm responsible for. I'm not responsible for what they say, but I am responsible for how they interpret it. If you, with your sponsor, if you go down that line, that's the way out of that, to separate what you can change and what you can't. Ark House, you had I think someone there had a question.
Hi, Anita Abbott. Have I on mute? Yeah. Hi, Anita, Addict, you know, when you say, like, I'm on my step 10 now, but on step 6, you know, when I was on that step, I was, or I presumed I was entirely ready to have God remove all my defects of character. But the more I'm going through the process, the more I'm realizing I have to deal and pray on them on a daily, you know, because it's quite easy for my egotistic ways to come back, you know, with getting a little bit of that bit of clean time behind me, you know, and then old habits propping up, you know, defects of character. I didn't even know the meaning of the word when I first came into the treatment centre. You know, I'm a 6 and 7, you know, I don't have a problem with the word God. I'm brought up as a Catholic. And I did want to have all these, you know, these defects of character removed. But I think that is a daily thing that you have to work on, isn't it? Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So whenever I find myself acting out, whether it's mentally or practically, the principle of step 6 has to come in. Am I willing to remember the fundamental decision I've made to live on a spiritual basis? And so rather than tackling the individual defect, I go back to the fundamental decision. What type of life do I want to lead? One based on self, or one based on losing myself completely? So yes, I get to spend it. It's like there's a step 6, there's like a flash of lightning where the whole landscape lights up at once. And then the rest of your life, you have to keep trying to remember what the landscape looked like when the lightning lit it up. So it's step 6. There is a definite thing that one does in step 6 to say, right, in principle, I want to live a new life. But then one has to spend the rest of one's life actually putting that into practice. So it's quite right. Yes, very good. Paolo, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for the workshop. I want to ask about step 6. Do you do it like during the day? You have any method of working the step 6, or you do it just in like repeated after doing this, going through the steps? And yeah, that's my question.
I'm a great fan of keeping things very simple and doing them exactly as they are in the way the program is laid out. So I only do step 6 when I've just done step 5 and I'm about to do step 7. The ideas of the steps can be used throughout the day, but the formal step itself, what matters during the day, I don't want to get too lost in individual defects. On page 87, if I get into trouble, what I'm looking for is when I'm agitated or doubtful, God, what is the next right thought or action? And I get myself tied up in knots very easily. And the way out of it is not to try to untie the knot. The way out of it is do the next right thing. Sometimes in the morning, I'm just there. You can't do anything with this on the tape. For the people listening to tape, I'm pointing at my head. There is nothing I can do with it. So I just do some work for 3 or 4 or 5 hours. And then I look back at the problem my mind had come up with at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the knot has disappeared. It's difficult to untie a knot which doesn't exist, which is why I don't want to try and solve my mental problems, because they're all fictions. You can't use real things to dissolve fictional problems. So the best thing is to get into reality, do the next right thing, and eventually there is a click and you think, I felt okay for 10 minutes. Amazing. And then you realize the problem has been solved. That's God removing the defect because I'm doing the next right thing. Stephen.
Thanks very much for that, Tim. You mentioned that there's a difference between what's in the scrolls and what's actually in the what's actually written about the steps in the paragraph. And one of the differences on this is that on the scrolls it says became entirely ready, and in the paragraph it just says we're now ready. And I wondered what was the difference? Because I have had the question asked of me, how do I know that I'm entirely ready? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think with any of the stuff, by the way, I've just opened the chat. For some reason, it was turned off. A couple of people have requested that. With any of the steps, one can only do them as sincerely as one can in the moment. And that's all that's required. And yes, it's true, you realize that the depth of your understanding and surrender was not great a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but it was the best you could do at the time. My old sponsor, Brian, he reports his friend, I think Val, who dealt with some family situation, and she said, I dealt with it. I wouldn't give you tuppence for how I dealt with it, but I dealt with it. And I like that a lot. And I think my working with the steps is like that. I wouldn't give you tuppence for how I do it, but I do it. It is, someone said the steps are so important, they're worth doing badly. It is better to do them badly than not at all. The only way you can really do it wrong is by not doing it, by running away from it, thinking when I'm able to do it perfectly, then I'll consider starting. So one's got to be willing to roll one's sleeves up and do it badly and not understand what one's doing, but have a good old go. And that's enough to make a fool of oneself as one's doing it. Very good. Anything else before we go and have our lunch? Jason, I think we've had a moment of reprieve, so would you like to close us out?
Yeah, I'll just turn the recording